Today I want to talk about a current controversy among sports scientists and bodybuilders themselves, and this involves whether you can get big muscles lifting lighter weights. I know there's several videos that are already on YouTube that have discussed this. I've looked at a couple of them. They stink out loud, to tell you the truth, because as I've said in the past, anybody can make a video, and any jerk on the street can make a video. I don't want to even get into that, but I decided to set the record straight by doing my own video discussing this controversy about whether you can get big lifting light weights. Now, to answer that question, we got to go back in time. For example, when I first began training, the training dogma was that if you want to get big muscles, you got to lift weights. In fact, lifting weights is based on what they call the progressive resistance principle, which means that you gradually, as you train, you should always gradually add more and more resistance to tax the muscles and basically put some stress on the muscle fibers so that they'll respond by growing. And so over the years, it became absolutely logical that you can't really get big unless you lift heavy weights. But there's been a couple of problems with this along the lines. For example, I wrote an article recently in my Applied Metabolics newsletter where I pointed out that there really is no direct relationship between muscle strength and muscle size. I know it sounds a little silly. You're probably saying, this guy's crazy, he's out of his mind. But think about it for a second. How many, for example, Olympic weightlifters have you seen, especially the lighter weight categories? These guys lift prodigious amounts of weight, and yet they have like 14-inch arms. They're very small. Secondly, over the years, I've interviewed many elite professional bodybuilders. Some of these guys were huge. And when I actually trained with many of them, and I was surprised to see that considering their muscle size, they didn't really lift that heavy a weight. I'm not saying they lifted very light weights, but you didn't see these guys doing like 500-600-pound bench presses. And I know what you're saying. I probably trained with them when they were training before a contest where they weren't interested in lifting heavy. I've also trained with them off season, and even off season, their strength, let's say, did not match their muscle size appearance. And I'm not saying that if you get stronger, you don't get bigger, but there's not a direct relationship, and there's no rule that says that you can't get larger muscles without having to lift heavy weights. Now, this all came to a head a couple of years ago when let me go back. Before I get into this, let me discuss a little physiology here. They have something called the Henneman's principle of muscle fiber contraction. This was devised by a physiologist named Henneman years ago, and what he discovered was that muscles work in a very economical way. In other words, the brain only kind of employs the minimal amount of muscle fibers to get any movement done. It starts with the slow twitch fibers, or so-called endurance fibers. In other words, like just light movements, walking around. You're using mainly the slow twitch fibers. To involve the deeper fibers or the type 2 fibers, you have to add more resistance to the weight. And here's a key point. The type 2 fibers, such as the type 2X fibers, which are most amenable to muscle hypertrophy or growth, they don't come into play. This is important. They don't come into play until there's like complete fatigue of the type 1 fibers. In other words, as the type 1 or endurance fibers kind of die out, then the type 2 fibers take over. And that's an important point, and you'll see how it relates to what I'm about to say. Anyway, to get back to what I was saying, a couple of years ago, scientists were trying to figure out how to help older people who had a condition called sarcopenia. Sarcopenia refers to a loss of muscle mass with age. There's a lot of reasons for this, much too extensive to go into detail in this video. A lot of factors are involved: hormonal factors, lack of testosterone, lack of IGF-1, lack of growth hormone, lack of insulin resistance with age, anabolic resistance to amino acid uptake in muscle. There's a lot of reasons for sarcopenia, but the main reason is basically most of the people that get sarcopenia have never really been involved in any amount of extensive exercise, and what they're doing basically is paying the price of a lifetime of sedentary living. In other words, they've never taxed their muscles through weight training. A lot of them have never did aerobics. And the body is a machine. It works on a use it or lose it principle. If you don't tax your muscles, if you don't push them, they're gonna just disappear. It's use it or lose it. As I said, that's the way the whole human body works, including your brain. If you don't use your brain cells disappear, and as you get older, you have a higher chance for dementia, that type of thing. And again, head to toe, use it or lose it. So how does this apply? Well, the scientists were trying to figure out what can we do to help these older people with sarcopenia. The obvious solution appeared to be resistance training or weight training. But in other words, these people were so weak that, curling a 5-pound dumbbell, they couldn't do 2 reps. A lot of these people could not stand up. A lot of them had walkers. Their legs were so atrophied and weak. So what the scientists did is experiment with various programs. The initial programs were done at Tufts University. And what they found is by giving these older people a certain type of weight training program that involved very, very light weights, something like 20% of 1 rep, 15 to 20% of 1 rep maximum. That's very, very light. We're talking like 5, 10-pound dumbbells, or on a leg extension machine, something like 20 pounds, 10 pounds. But if they give them the light weights, and they had the older people do the exercises, this is a key point. They had the older people work out to failure. It took a little bit of experimentation to find the right weight because it varied with individuals. But guess what? When the older people used very light weights and they went and they trained to failure, they actually started getting muscle growth. And some of these people were over 90 years old. There was one guy I remember who had been using a walker for like the past 20 years. He couldn't even walk. He started doing leg extensions. And again, he used the same principle, light weights, high reps. I'm talking 20 to 30 reps per set, maybe 3 sets per exercise. And after about, I don't know how many months it was, maybe 2, 3 months, he was able to get rid of his walker and he started walking normally. This was a guy, I think he was about 92 years of age. This, of course, got the scientists very excited. And the next step was to see if this applied to younger people. So then they now had established that lifting lighter weights but training to failure can actually cause a certain amount of muscle growth in older people. Now, I'm not going to lie to you, the muscle growth attained by these people 80, 90 years of age, it doesn't set them back to the point where they're going to step on the Mr. Olympia stage and compete with Phil Heath. But believe me, just having the ability to move again, being ambulatory, being able to get rid of walkers, being able to move normally, that allowed them to actually get out of nursing homes, because 95% of the people who are in nursing homes are not there for mental reasons like most people think. They're there because they're so frail, their muscles have atrophied so much, they can't even feed themselves, they can't even dress themselves. If you strengthen the muscles, guess what? These people become independent. They can get out of the nursing homes, unless, of course, they do have dementia. That's another situation. Anyway, so the scientists said to themselves, well, if it works with older people, would it work with younger people? And, a lot of the scientists admitted, they said, nah, it's not going to work because, we've known for years that to get bigger muscles, you got to lift heavy. You have to lift heavy weights, heavy basic exercises, squats, bench press, bent over rows, heavy barbell curls. That's the only way to get muscles to grow. You can't make them. In fact, an axiom, it's been stated for years. If you want to just tone your muscles, let's say you're an actor and you want to look muscular on screen, but you don't want to look big, you lift light weights. And this will tone the muscles. It'll make you look cut if you follow a good diet, but you're not going to gain any muscle size. But the key point is when you train light like that, you're not going to failure. So there's no stimulation of the muscle fibers. The key point when you're lifting light weights, you have to train to failure 20 to 30 reps. Why? Because in that rep range, you exhaust the slow twitch fibers and you actually start to hit the same muscle fibers, the type 2 fibers that are normally hit when you lift heavy weights. You can get them, you can stimulate them by merely doing lightweight, maybe 30% of 1 rep max, but training to failure, 20 to 30 reps. So they tested this in young people. These were guys like 20 to 30 years old, and they didn't expect much. They thought it would be a failure. And then they had one group of young people who lifted light weights, 20 to 30 reps of, 20 to 30% of maximum 1 rep to failure. And then they had the other group who trained in a normal way where they lifted, let's say, 70 to 80% of 1 rep maximum, which is fairly heavy weight. That's the usual style of training. And after about 6-7 weeks, they compared the two, and here's what they found. Exactly the same amount of muscle growth. Exactly the same. The group that lifted light weights and did 20 to 30 reps to failure gained as much muscle mass as those who lifted up to 90% of 1 rep maximum. They gained the same amount of muscle. There was one difference that's important to note, and that's the strength factor. In other words, you can gain muscle size. You can gain just as much muscle size if you do light training, 20 to 30 reps to failure. You can gain same amount of muscle size as lifting heavy weights, but, and this is an important point, you're not going to get the strength that you get from lifting heavy weights. To get stronger, you must lift heavy weights. Why? Because strength involves other factors besides stimulating muscle fibers, such as neuromuscular factors, and you can't involve those factors unless you lift heavy. So, if you want strength, you're going to have to lift heavy. If you don't like to lift heavy all the time, a good plan is to do what I said in a past video. You could periodize your workout. You could do something called linear periodization, where one workout you do, let's say the light weights to failure, 20 to 30% of 1 rep maximum. You do all your exercises like that. And let me tell you, it's hard. I've tried. If you think doing 20 to 30 reps to complete failure is easy, you haven't tried it yet. It's hard. You do that one workout. The next workout, you can do, let's say, moderate weight and do about 10 to 12 reps. Moderate weight would be, let's say, 60 to 70% of 1 rep maximum. And then the third rep, now you go to your heavy weight, which is up to 90% of 1 rep maximum. And for that, you do 6 to 8 reps. In other words, you alternate all 3 of these workouts. This way, you're taking a lot of stress off your joints by not lifting heavy all the time. And you're in a constant state of stimulating muscle growth. So, that's the truth. The truth of the matter is that you can stimulate muscle growth with light weights. In fact, a recent study showed that, again, they compared 2 groups. One group, this young men, one group lifted weights in the conventional manner, meaning 80 to 90% of 1 rep maximum. The other group lifted light weights to failure, 20 to 30 reps, only 20 to 30% of a 1 rep maximum, and they both groups gained exactly the same muscle mass. Again, the group that lifted the heavy weights got stronger. So there you go. That this is a scientific fact, but I have to emphasize, don't fool yourself by just lifting light weights. If you just lift a 20-pound dumbbell and don't go to failure, you're not going to gain any muscle at all. The key to making this system work is you have to train to failure, and it's going to take a little experimentation on your part. You're going to have to experiment with the weights. You're going to have to figure out a weight where, let's say you're doing dumbbell curls. Using the light system, what you do is you use a weight that's approximately 20 to 30% of your 1 rep maximum for the dumbbell curls, and you're going to try and you're going to do curls with it. If it starts to hurt on the 20th rep where you're struggling to lift it, you've got the right amount of weight. Because then on the 20th rep, you want to just force out maybe 5 to 10 extra reps until you literally can't curl your arm. That's voluntary muscular failure. That's the type of light training that'll make you grow. If you don't train to failure with light training, you're not going to grow at all. All you'll do is what the actors do. You'll tone your muscles. There'll be no muscle growth whatsoever. So that's about it. You can grow with light training, and that's about it. I know it sounds hard to believe, but that's the truth. There's been probably maybe 15 studies in the last 2 years that have confirmed this. So, again, trust me when I tell you, a lot of the biggest bodybuilders you see, look at the videos of Phil Heath, for example. Nobody would consider Phil Heath having small muscles. Yet if you look at the weights he lifts, I'm not saying they're light, but for a guy his size, they're not very impressive. I never came close to having the muscle size of Phil Heath, but when I was in my 20s, I lifted much heavier weights than Phil Heath lifts. But I never had his size. There's a lot of genetic components, and the fact is I wasn't using anabolic steroids, which, adds a lot to it also. Anyway, that's it for lifting light weights. If you want more information on nutrition, exercise science, supplements, fat loss techniques that really work, hormonal therapy, ergogenic aids, general information about health, how to prevent cardiovascular disease. I got some fantastic stuff all coming up in my Applied Metabolics newsletter, www.appliedmetabolics.com. There's nothing like it anywhere on the web. There's no magazines that come close. The magazines today, they don't pay freelancers anything. So, you get what you pay for. I mean, nobody's going to work for free. Nobody's going to do the intensive research like I do for Applied Metabolics. Nobody's going to do it for free, believe me. And, the people that are smart enough to do this aren't dumb enough to work for free. So you're not going to see this in magazines. You're not going to see it on the web. But you will see this intensive, in-depth information in Applied Metabolics. I don't care what your level of education or experience or knowledge is, you will learn something in every single issue of Applied Metabolics. I absolutely guarantee it. And I cover material that you won't find anywhere else. It's kind of off-the-road material, but it's very useful, very practical. I don't write about stuff that's just interesting. I write about stuff that will help you and that you can incorporate in your life and your workouts today. So subscribe today to Applied Metabolics, www.appliedmetabolics.com. And I do answer questions from subscribers. I have an email portal on the site, on the Applied Metabolics site, but I limit my answers or my responses only to current subscribers of Applied Metabolics. I do not respond to questions that are just unsolicited questions. People who watch this video will send me, I'm sorry, if you're not a subscriber, I don't have time to answer your question. So don't bother. It'll just be deleted. That's the way it has to be. So if you want to have the best friend you'll ever have in your life, go to your local shelter, adopt a dog. Any breed of dog is great. They're man's best friend. Right now, I'm still kind of very sad about the loss of my dog Chip, who died on October 11th. He had a very fatal form of cancer. I paid a lot of money to vets to treat him anyway because he was my best friend. And I did everything I can to help him, but it was a losing battle. I miss him dearly. I have one dog left, Bruno. Bruno's quiet. You won't hear him barking in the videos. But again, I couldn't imagine life without a dog. They're just fantastic. So take care. Bye-bye.